Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. So glad to be back with you at the Dr. Jeff Experience. Here it is on this Tuesday. Um, what a blessing it is to be before you. And tonight we've got a great stacked show of information. I want you to go ahead and tag somebody and let them know that we are here. We're going to be taking all of your comments, all of your questions. And tonight we're going to be talking about, just give me one moment. I'm going to make an. All right. So we're going to be talking about faith, community, and civics and the power in shaping society. Okay. We want to talk about this, and what this is actually a little snippet of some of the courses that are available at the Fauntleroy Institute. Remember, we introduced this to you a couple of weeks ago, and the Fauntleroy Institute deals with um, faith, leadership, ministry and leadership, leadership in ministry, and also in the corporate settings, dealing with leadership in ministry positions, and leadership in corporate area. And we have about 13 classes that are available to those who are doing some type of leadership or want to become a member of leadership in their faith community or corporate area and management, whatever it is. We've got a whole bunch of those classes that are available. But tonight, specifically, we're going to be talking about the importance of faith, community, and civics. And I want to thank Dr. Professor Harold Schulier, one of my professors from Howard University, a well-noted professor, well-known theologian and author. He just happened to share an article, a post, and it was an article from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and it literally talked about and pulled out some of the very things that I wanted to deal with tonight. So I thank him for sharing that. I mean, he's always a source of good information. So I'm so glad to be connected to him. So tonight we want to deal with faith, community, and civics, the power of ministry in shaping society. Go ahead and tag somebody, let them know that we're here. If you got any questions, we will be taking your comments live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and LinkedIn Live. So if you're on any one of those areas, any one of those social media sites, go ahead and put in your question, type in your comment. So according to this article, the Chronicle of Philanthropy, it points out that churches can and should be what's known as a civic third place, especially now in this deeply polarized nation that we're living in. We need more what's known as third places. Now, you may ask the question, what is a third place? Quite simply, the third place is what's known as a gathering spot outside of the home, the workplace. And the third place will be that place where people connect, where people converse, and they contribute to civic life. Okay. So much has been written about the country's loneliness epidemic and how people feel fragmented from one another, especially after COVID. You remember during COVID, everybody was just isolated and stuck in the house. They couldn't go out to the local coffee shops. They couldn't go to church. They couldn't go anywhere. Everybody was in quarantine. And since then, people have been noticing the effects of loneliness, especially from our senior population, even some of our children now, because of this highly polarized um, place that we live in, this nation that we live in. Loneliness is a big thing. And how do we counteract that? Through that third place, through community. Okay. The loneliness epidemic has really been pointed out in how people feel fragmented from one another. Places of worship, especially in rural communities, they're uniquely positioned to meet this need. Now, this article, amazingly, and I've talked about this before. I've looked at Pew Research. I've looked at a whole bunch of research dealing with church and faith institutions. And this particular article pointed out that there's an estimated 15,000 churches that will close in 2025. Every church or faith institution should be and can become a home for what we call civic revival. Civic revival. So let's deal with that term civic. And let's do a little background of the word civic. If we're going to talk about, and much of this is going to deal with civic, faith, community, and civics. But since I talked about this civic revival, this revival of the faith institution becoming that third place, that place of worship, that place where people connect, where people converse, and people contribute to civic life. Civic is an adjective. It means of or relating to a citizen, a city, citizenship, or community affairs. Now, when you do the etymology of that, it goes back to around the 1540s, pertaining to a city or citizenship. Originally known as the civic crown, or in Latin, the corona civica, which was a chaplet of oak leaves. It was a necklace of oak leaves awarded to one who saved the life of a fellow citizen in battle. Kind of deep, right? That's how far back the word citizen goes. Corona civica, a chaplet or a necklace of oak leaves awarded to the one who saved the life of a fellow citizen in battle. And Lord knows we're in a battle right now. We are in a battle of all sorts. And so citizen or civics is a great thing to learn about, and being civic minded or civically involved is one of the goals, along with the spiritual and the natural, that the faith institution has to deal with. In 1885, the word civic became to mean the science of government, study of the rights and responsibilities of a citizen. So in all of it, when we talk about the civic revival, we're talking about the responsibilities of a citizen. We're talking about the faith institutions taking their rightful place amongst the community and being involved with leadership, being involved with fellowship, being involved with the responsibilities, the study of the rights and responsibilities of a citizen. So you get it when I talk about this civic revival? So let's talk about the first part. And this, again, is a class that's available that we're running this summer at a discounted price at the Fauntleroy Institute. Let's deal with what we've tagged ministry and community partnerships. And why is this important? Why is this important? You heard me talk about this before. Why is it important to deal with ministry and community partnerships? Well, number one, it deals with community building, and that should be a gimme. Ministry is not just about spiritual guidance, okay? Spiritual guidance is the crux of what is known at the faith institutions. But it can't be just about the spiritual guidance, but and really, when you're dealing with civics, that still has a spiritual undertone. But among the spiritual part, we're creating strong supportive networks. And that's what community building is, supporting strong community networks. Every faith institution needs a strong, supportive community network. Give me a moment. I'm tagging some people and let them know that we are available. And you go ahead and take a moment to tag some folks. So anyway, as I was saying, the ministry is not just about the spiritual guidance, but creating strong supportive networks. What do I mean by strong supportive networks? Partnerships with local organizations, your food pantries, outside of your food pantry that you may have for yourself, food co-ops, clothing locations, businesses, and nonprofits can address the tangible needs of those within the faith institution. And it's good to partner with them because both can do something for each other. You would think that, well, what can what can one do for the other? Well, for instance, I know that I was part of a food pantry, and we dealt with people who we collected shoes and sneaks and sent it to Africa. We sent some to Ukraine. We sent it to other countries. We collected clothes and we donated to women's shelters, and businesses would donate computers and office furniture and all types of business machines. All of this becomes a supportive network for those who are attending your faith institution. And that's community building, because you're working along with those organizations, and you can help them spiritually, and you can help them with some of the things that your organization may offer, along with them partnering with you. So it's a win-win for the community. These businesses, these nonprofits, these organizations, whether it's it's a win-win for you, whether it's food insecurity, mental health support, or affordable housing. This is effective ministry and community partnerships. Whatever faith institution that you may be a part of, it's incumbent upon you to make sure that your faith institution is partnering with these outside organizations. Again, ministry is not just about the spiritual guidance. Let me tell you, from the beginning, I told you that the Chronicle of Philanthropy, along with Pew Research, says that over 15,000 faith institutions will close just in 2025. They say in the next coming years, over 100,000 faith institutions will close the doors because they stayed with the mega church mindset instead of the multi-changing worship and faith institution model that's taking place. We're in an age of a multinational change, and not just multi-national, but it's a big change going on within faith organizations. We're in the age of information. So as a faith leader is teaching, the audience is Googling and fact checking what that faith leader is saying as they're saying it. And there's more choices that are out there. But however, with all of that being said, if you don't have a community concept to your faith institution, guaranteed that your doors are going to close. There's a many faith institutions that you see now have open cafes before and after service. They've put out benches. I know the church that I attend, after church or before church, when we have large services and there's no room inside, you can sit outside on good days, or we have tents. We go to our community center, so it's streamed. You don't have to basically just sit in the sanctuary. But also with those benches and tables outside of the faith location, you can fellowship after church. You know, you meet somebody, you say something to them, they say something back to you, and they may be part of an organization that you're part of or would like to be a part of. It may be somebody that you met that knows somebody, and you guys get to talking, and you want to further the conversation without maybe going to a restaurant or something. You can sit down right there at that faith location and carry it out. Or you may be looking for some help in some way, and you see somebody and you open the conversation and they're able to assist you right then and there. So ministry and community partnerships is important also because it has shared goals. Shared goals. Faith communities. Wow, I'm drinking a good tea. This tea I have in my tea bag, beetroot, hawthorn berry, cayenne pepper, and turmeric. It's so good for you, and it's so flavorful. Anyway, faith communities are uniquely positioned to foster collaboration across societal divides. What do I mean by that? The faith community is uniquely positioned to foster collaboration across societal divides. If, in fact, we are utilizing the godly model of ministry, then we're not dealing with one's gender, one's race, one's socioeconomic status. Ministry isn't, and it should never be, in a silo, but instead it's about breaking down barriers to create a stronger collective impact. Okay? It's about community building. It's about relationship building. Okay? That's why community partnerships, ministry and community partnerships are so important. It's about breaking down the barriers to create a stronger collective impact. That means that we've got to go beyond just doing this for this group. Now, in doing ministry and community partnerships, you have to realize that you can't do everything, but you can do something very well. You can do something very well. But you must know that ministry isn't a silo. I often say that if your faith institution is not making an impact 1 mile north, south, east, or west of where you're located, then you're just an organization of folks that get together, and it's just a social club. In other words, if your doors close at your faith institution, would the community be glad or would it be sad? That's a question you have to ask. So why is it important to have ministry and community partnerships? Well, it has community building, shared goals, but it also should have a holistic approach to well-being. In other words, addressing both spiritual and physical needs, um, addressing the both spiritual and physical needs creates a more balanced and resilient community. In the book entitled The Black Church in the African American Experience by C. Eric Lincoln and Lawrence Mamiya, they state that in ministry, there's a dialectic between priestly and prophetic functions. In other words, every church is involved with both functions. Now, the priestly functions, as talked about in this book, it states that the priestly functions involve only those activities concerned with worship and maintaining the spiritual life of members. Church maintenance and activities are the major thrusts. But when we deal with the prophetic functions, this refers to involvement in political concerns and activities in the wider community. Classically, prophetic activity has meant pronouncing a radical word of God's judgment. And some churches are closer to one end than the other. Priestly churches are fortresses of survival, and prophetic churches are networks of liberation. But both types of churches or faith institutions, they also illustrate both functions, which means that liberation churches also perform the priestly functions. And the priestly churches contain liberation potential. And we're always going to follow the God's movement, God's unction, and the transliteration of God's word or the Bible. For instance, in Philippians 2:13, it tells us that partnership pleases God. It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. I'll put that up there. I'm going to put these scriptures up there for you so that you can have it for your reference. Philippians 2:13 tells us that partnership pleases God. It is not good for man to be alone. Examples like the partnership between Moses and Aaron and David and Jonathan, they demonstrate the value of collaboration in leadership and mutual support. Let's look at what scripture says in Hebrews 10, verses 20 through 25. It calls, and I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version, it calls for serious thinking about other believers with a purpose to stir up or provoke them in their love and service, which is good works. Godly perseverance is also a community endeavor, meaning meet together. Community encouragement toward perseverance requires being together. Are you with me so far? Again, we're dealing with the priestly and the prophetic. And in both, we're dealing based on the scriptures. Hebrews 10, 22 through 25, one more time. It calls for serious thinking about the believers with a purpose to stir up or provoke them in their love and service, good works. And we know that good works is not the only thing, but it is a good part of it. Godly perseverance is also a community endeavor. Godly perseverance. In other words, it's like the fruits of the Spirit. Okay. So let's deal with a particular case study of ministry and community partnership. A church or a mosque or a synagogue partnering with a local food bank to provide groceries for families, or an interfaith organization working on environmental justice, which is another class that's going to be available, Ministry and Environmental Justice. So a church partnering with a local food bank to provide groceries for families, or an interfaith organization working on environmental justice initiatives. Or also, when we're doing comprehensive prison ministry, it would include talking to and partnering with families of victims and those who are incarcerated, those family members, because that's a loss. That's part of a grief ministry almost, because that's a loss in the family. While that husband, that wife, that mother, that father, that uncle, that cousin, that brother, that sister, that person who is incarcerated, there's a loss to the family. So we want to make sure that we are the faith community is providing for that family of the victim and the person who's incarcerated, to make sure that the victim is doing well and has those needs being tended to, along with those who are incarcerated, so that when they are released, because we know that 85 to 87% of each person who's incarcerated will be released at some point. So we want to make it so that when they see that the faith community has partnered with their families to make sure that they had things that were needed while they were gone, and we could do what we can to help them to make sure that they have what they need when they are released. That means partnering with the institution to find out if that person is drug or alcohol addicted, if they have mental issues, if they have a lack of educational skills. Because what we don't want is continued recidivism. We want to cut down the rate of recidivism. And what better place to do that? What better place to do that than the faith institution, your church, your mosque, your synagogue? That's the place. That's the place for active community partnerships. What does a successful partnership look like in ministry? And that's some of the questions that you need to ask yourself as you take on this particular endeavor. You got to ask the question, how can faith leaders connect with secular organizations for greater impact? Well, quite simply, it means that there is a conversation that takes place. There's communication that takes place with your community leaders to find out what is it that the faith institution can provide to assist in making communities greater. Like I said before, everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something. And that's the goal. That's the goal, to do something. Okay. Yeah, there's a comment. Some churches offer a path for rejoining society after incarceration so that they become valuable participants in society. That's correct. That's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about comprehensive prison reform. And again, that's another class that is available at the Fauntleroy Institute. Another discussion idea that you can bring up when you're doing ministry and community partnerships is the ethical and spiritual responsibility of faith-based organizations to uplift marginalized communities, okay? To uplift marginalized communities. The ethical and spiritual responsibility of faith-based organizations to uplift marginalized communities. In other words, you want to look at that. You want to do some research on what are the ethical and spiritual responsibilities of the faith-based organization to do this, to uplift. In other words, there's some guidelines that you want to adhere to. And when doing this, you want to make sure that you're not doing this just for show, but you're doing this to make a huge impact for the better of those you serve, and even outside that. Are you getting this? I hope you get. If you have any questions, go ahead and just put it in the chat. So we're talking about, our point tonight is faith, community, and civics, the power of ministry in shaping society. For too long, I've been involved in this for a number of years, and I have seen it go from one extreme to the other, and sometimes lacking community input. And you need to ask the question, as I go through these things, are you a part of an organization who are doing some of the things that I'm talking about? If not, you need to look for some institutions that are involved in this. So let's talk about number 2. We talked about the importance of community partnerships, ministry and community partnerships. But let's talk about ministry and community organizing. Why is this important? And again, I'm talking about stepping outside of the box and not only being spiritual, but being prophetic. That's what's needed in today's time. What do I mean by ministry and community organizing? Advocacy for justice. Real simple. Faith communities have historically been at the forefront of social justice movements, from the civil rights movement to the modern day advocacy for immigrant rights or environmental sustainability. We need to know that ministry can energize and direct community organizing efforts. And you see this continuously from the start, even before the civil rights organization. There were always faith communities involved in social justice movements. And if in fact we say that we are followers of Jesus, we are followers of Christianity or being Christ-like, then we really need to go back and see who Jesus was, because Jesus was a revolutionary. Jesus fought for the least, the less than. Jesus fought for those who were oppressed. He fought against the oppressive Roman government. Okay, so go back and really study the life of Christ. So ministry and community organizing deals with advocacy for justice. Okay, and we need to know that environmental sustainability, immigrant rights, rights of those who may not believe in some of the same things we believe or have a lifestyle that we don't believe, they're still humans. And as citizens, they still deserve to be treated in a humane way. And what better place to fight for them other than the faith institution? Faith institutions fighting for the rights of all those who live. Okay? Prayer is an essential essential in planning for community organizing. Prayer is essential. If you go back and look at some of the tapes in the civil rights movement, you'll see that prayer was essential. You had Muslims, you had Christians, you had Jewish, you had Buddhists, you had all kinds of folks praying. at the outset of what they did. You had folks praying during. Prayer is an essential element in planning for community organizing. Proverbs 16:9 says this way: the human mind plans the way, but the Lord directs the steps. But the Lord directs the steps. And that's the New Revised Standard Version. Proverbs 16:9. The human mind plans the way, but the Lord directs the steps. Romans 8:28, very familiar passage. It says, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and who are called according to God's purpose. Again, let me emphasize this. Whether it's ministry and community partnerships, whether it's ministry and community organizing, if you're not doing this according to what God told you to do, then you're just trying to be a part of something, which is good, but it's going to be a problem. Matter of fact, Proverbs 21:5 speaks to that. It says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty come only to want. In other words, they never complete the mission because their plans weren't diligently led by God. You got to spend some time with God and find out what God wants you to do. That's why I know in some of these political circles, there's no prayer. There's no relationship with God, not because God is not the author of confusion. God would never lead you to be against anybody. There's a proper way of doing things, and I believe that's what's lacking in society right now. So when we're dealing with ministry and community organizing, prayer is essential in planning for community organizing. Ministry and community organizing is advocacy for justice. One of the other important things about why ministry and community organizing is important is because when you do this through the faith institution, mobilizing faith for social change takes place. Okay? Mobilizing faith for social change takes place. In other words, beyond the pulpit, ministry provides the framework to inspire collective action. Okay? So we've got our audience for Sunday. We've got our audience for Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever your Bible study or your study may take place, your Quran, your Torah, whatever it may be. You've got that on your particular Sabbath day. But then beyond the pulpit, ministry provides the framework to inspire collective action. In other words, theological teachings around justice, compassion, and mercy can be powerful motivators for activism. So from a theological standpoint, theological teachings around justice, what I just talked about, Jesus being the Jesus of justice, compassion, and mercy, can be powerful motivators for activism. And that's what ministry and community organizing can be. Mobilizing faith for social change. Also, ministry and community organizing deals with empowering people. Empowering people through the priestly and the prophetic of the faith institution. Ministry can serve as a space where individuals find their voices and learn how to channel their faith into meaning societal change. We've got many examples of this. You look at Reverend Dr. William Barber and the movements that he has organized. You look at Reverend Jamal Bryant and some of the movements that he is now organizing. Of course, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. There's some newcomers in society that are dealing with some great movements. An Asian sister, Sister Hyepin M, last name I-M, Hyepin I-M, Hyepin M. She's the founder and the president of Faith and Community Empowerment, which is a nonprofit organization that empowers the Korean and Asian American community in Los Angeles and across the country. And this organization partners with many other institutions throughout that community for the good of the community. You've got Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, who has served as the scholar in residence at the National Council of Jewish Women since 2020. You've got the Reverend Michael Ray Matthews, who is the Deputy Director and Chief Faith Officer of Faith in Action, which was formerly known as the PICO National Network, PICO. I can't remember what the acronym was for. You've got Sister Farhana Kara, who is the President and Executive Director of Muslim Advocates, which is a civil rights organization based in Washington, D.C. You've got Jamie Manson, who was named President of Catholics for Choice in October of 2020. And then you've got Sister Anthea Butler, PhD, who is an Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Africana Studies and Interim Chair of Religious Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. So as you can see, all of those that I have pointed out all have a faith-based institution that they represent for the good of society, okay? These are all examples of faith leaders who have organized peaceful protests, advocacy campaigns, or, really important, legislative lobbying efforts using the moral authority of their faith to galvanize a community for action. It is faith in action. It's faith in action. We are talking about a subject tonight of faith, community, and civics, the power of ministry shaping society. It's important, ladies and gentlemen. It's very important that we have our faith institutions as the base for making our communities better. We cannot depend on government to come to our rescue. Let me say it again. We cannot rely on government to come to our rescue to make our communities better. They can become a partner, but it's up to us. It's up to us collectively coming together and doing this. So some of the discussion items that you need to deal with when you're talking about ministry and community organizing. How can ministry effectively turn spiritual teaching into action? So when you take on this mantle of doing community organizing through ministry, you have to ask the question, how can ministry effectively turn spiritual teaching into action? What do we do? Where does our teaching come from? Who is it that speaks to what it is that we're trying to communicate to deal with spiritual action? Another question is, what are some modern day community organizing examples within faith communities? Well, the answer to that is you've got to go back and deal with those who are in the struggle, who are in the battle. Don't try to reinvent the wheel when you're doing ministry and community organizing, okay? It's a waste of time. Add what is important to your particular area or your particular need to those who are already doing something. Okay, just enhance what they're already doing. Take examples of what they have done and what they're doing, and then make it work for you with some tweaking in your particular area or within your particular need. Again, I always say that ministry is solving problems, meeting needs, and solving problems. That's my personal vision statement and mission statement. Also, you want to ask the question, how does ministry address the political and social challenges faced by underserved communities? Boy, this is so important. This is a great discussion that you must have when you're dealing with ministry and community organizing. How does ministry address the political and social challenges faced with how does ministry address the political and social challenges faced by underserved communities? Now, if you're one who believes that you're not going to talk about political or social issues in the church, you go on teach Jesus, 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 I guarantee you're going to be one of those estimated 15,000 churches that are going to close the doors. Okay. I'm not saying that we have to take away the priestly and just deal with the prophetic. Okay. What I'm saying is it's got to be both, and it's got to be balanced. And you got to deal with politics and social challenges faced by underserved communities. Legislation, speaking to legislators, to community leaders, those who can impact communities through laws, through policies. Okay. So last but not least, here we go. Here's a question. Should faith-based institutions encourage its members to participate in politics outside of encouraging them to vote, but also to run for political offices? Absolutely, positively. We need more faith-minded, we need more spirit-led people in office. Now, I'm not talking about these folks who are radical, because we got enough radicals in politics right now. But I think that it is important for faith institutions to identify good leaders who have proven themselves to be those who are involved in the community, those who are concerned for the needs of all people, not for the need of greed, but for the needs of the community. Those who are civic minded, those who are community minded, those who want to see better for all people. I believe it's incumbent upon us to identify those people, help them learn about civics and the legislative process, so that when we support them and have them run for office, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they know what that position calls for. Because that's one of the issues. We've seen people who are loud and out there, and we say, oh, you ought to be a politician. The same way folks who, have an awesome prayer life, or I'm sorry, go ahead and pray in public. We say, oh, you're going to be a preacher. No. Anyway, that's a whole nother story for another time. Last but not least, since we're on that subject, and that's a good segue, Karen, let's deal with the last subject I want to talk about when we're dealing with faith, community, and civics. This class is also going to be given this summer. And then beyond that, it's called Ministry and Civics. We talked about civics and we gave you the definition of what civic means. And why is ministry and civics important? Why is ministry and civics important? Because civic responsibility and faith go together. Ministry often instills the values of justice, equality, and service to others, principles that directly align with active citizenship and the duties of participating in civic life. Civic responsibility and faith. Ministry often instills the values of justice. Hear me out. The values of justice, equality, and service to others, principles that directly align with active citizenship and the duties of participating in civic life. You remember early on when I told you about the etymology of the word civics and where it came from? In the early 1540s, pertaining to a city or citizenship, originally known as the civic crown, or the Latin version of that, corona civica, which was a chaplet or necklace of oak leaves that were awarded to the one who saved the life of a fellow citizen in battle. And then we get on to 1885, where we see the meaning for civic, meaning the science of government, study of the rights and responsibilities of citizen. So civics, the study of civics and ministry in civics, is us being about rewarding those within our society by making sure that we instill the values of justice, equality, and service to others. Those are the principles that directly align with active citizenship and the duties of participating in civic life. Another reason why ministry and civics is important. Faith acts as a bridge in polarized politics. In this time when society is divided politically like I've never seen in my life, faith leaders, what they can do is they can help create a space for civil discourse. The onus is on faith leaders to focus on or help others focus on shared values rather than partisan divides. It's not about Democrat, Republican, or independent, but it's for faith leaders, faith institutions coming together to help create a space for civil discourse. In other words, for civic dialogue, civic conversations, focusing on shared values rather than partisan divides. What does this community need? Based upon the people who we are involved in, these are some of the things that we have seen our community in need of. So faith is a bridge in polarized politics. Another thing that is important is for ministry and civics is encouraging political awareness. And this goes to the question, Karen, that you had about encouraging people to run for office. Ministry, active, Christ-like, real exegetical study of the word can foster a more informed and engaged citizenry. Say it again. Ministry can foster a more informed and engaged citizenry. In other words, people go beyond the partisan politics when you deal with it in the form of ministry. Encouraging congregations to understand their rights and responsibilities as members of society, whether it's voting, advocating for public policy, or understanding local government structures. Civics, through ministry, what you do is you inform your congregations, you inform your audiences who is responsible for what. You inform your audience about local, county, state, federal, and the executive branch's roles. You teach about the legislative branch. You teach about the judicial branch. You teach about appointed boards. You teach about a council form of government or an appointed board of government. You teach about county commission. You teach about state offices. You teach about federal offices. You teach about judges and the judicial branch on the local level and the state level and the federal level and the executive level. Okay? You do this when your faith institution is involved with ministry and civics. Here's a case study example. A religious group advocating for education reform, healthcare access, voting rights based on belief that serving the public is a core tenet of faith. This is what faith institutions ought to be involved in, and thank God for those who are already involved in this. But ministry and civics looks like this: a religious group or a faith group advocating for education reform, healthcare access, or voting rights based on the belief that serving the public good is a core tenet of faith. Now, that's priestly and it's prophetic. Nothing wrong with that. And we've got to get back to it. We've got to get back to faith, community, and civics, because it is the power of ministry in shaping society. We've got to get outside the four doors of the church or the mosque or the synagogue. There's discussion ideas around this that you ought to have when you're engaging your faith institution in ministry and civics. You ought to ask the question of, how can religious leaders navigate the tension between faith and politics? And that's going to take some real in-depth study, but it's not difficult. It's not difficult. You got to ask the question, what does civic engagement look like in faith communities? And how can it be encouraged? Last but not least, you have to ask the question, how does ministry help people understand their roles in society beyond just worshiping? Listen, there's enough conferences, there's enough, and I'll get in trouble for this, but whatever. There's enough pastor anniversaries, there's enough revivals, and all that's cool. But don't get too priestly with no prophetic. Ask the questions when you're dealing with ministry and civics, ministry in community partnerships, all these. How can religious leaders navigate the tension between faith and politics? If in fact you are serious about doing good for your community, then you'll find a way to do that. The discussion must be, what does civic engagement look like in faith communities? And how can it be encouraged? How does ministry help people understand their roles in society beyond just worshiping? Listen, I know for a fact that there's a call to action. There's a call to action. And God is telling us, listen, don't just preach, my friend. Don't just preach. I didn't say don't preach. I said don't just preach. But instead, as you preach, don't forget to partner. Don't forget to organize. Don't forget to engage. I just gave somebody 3 points. Don't forget to partner. Don't forget to organize. Don't forget to engage in shaping a better world. That's our call. Are you called to ministry? Because if you're called to ministry, then this is going to be part of the burning in your heart. Partnering, organizing, and engaging in shaping a better world. How is your faith community stepping up to make a lasting impact? Listen, you really got to go back and study Jesus and justice. Okay? In calling people to practice and struggle for justice, Jesus was standing in continuity with the great prophetic tradition of the Hebrew Bible. Jesus himself practiced and spoke of justice. Matthew 6, New Testament. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. This is what's said at the Sermon on the Mount. So you want to be satisfied in ministry, satisfied in your faith? It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. And then Jesus added, blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of justice. Let them talk about you. Let them call you crazy. As long as you're working for the sake of others, the least, the less than, the looked over, the persecuted for no reason. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of justice, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Priestly, prophetic, working together. Jesus accused the religious people of his day, the Pharisees, of focusing on religious practice and neglecting justice. In other words, they dealt just with the priestly and not the prophetic. Jesus said in Luke 11:42, he said, woe to you Pharisees, you tithe herbs of all kinds and neglect justice and the love of God. The early followers of Jesus were a covenant renewal community. They were a covenant renewal community. In other words, they practiced distributive justice, living in what's known as a contrast community, or a group that actively lives out principles that are in opposition to societal norms or values, often with a focus on the spiritual or ethical values. Okay? These followers they were early followers who eliminated poverty in their midst. In the book of Acts, we read about the Jerusalem community, and in Acts 2:44 and 45, it says, all who believe on the day of Pentecost, all who believed were together and had all things in common. Look what they did. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. That's community ministry and community partnerships. That's ministry and community organizing. That's ministry and civics. In Acts 4:34 and 35, we're talking about the priestly and the prophetic working together. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned land or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Acts 4:34, 35. You want Bible? You got Bible. So as the early followers of Christ found a way to eliminate poverty in their midst, there was not a needy person among them. They did this because they loved one another. Love was central to the first followers of Jesus. They loved God, they loved their neighbor, they even strove to love their culturally defined enemies. Folks that weren't like them, folks that didn't look like them, folks that weren't the same color as them, folks who didn't have the same love interests as them. Integrating people of disparate backgrounds into an inclusive community. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm done. But let me say this to you. If we're going to save this country, and when I say save this country, I don't mean just the priestly part. I'm talking about priestly prophetic of all faiths. We've got to practice ministry and community partnerships. We've got to practice ministry and community organizing. We've got to practice ministry and civics. We got to practice ministry and the environment. We've got to practice all of these things. What I gave you tonight is just a little snippet of what you will be learning if you take classes with the Fauntleroy Institute. Now, let me let you know where to find this information. That's the website. If you want to find out about these classes. And let me tell you, we've got people who will be teaching this with the highest levels of education, the highest level of knowledge within that particular subject that they'll be teaching, 20, 30 years of that subject that they'll be teaching, PhDs, master's degrees. This is not some fly-by-night institution. It is a certificate course. And as we get further along, we will be applying for accreditation where we can be eligible to award students with associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate and PhD degrees. So it'll be accredited. It is a real institution. Okay, we're not playing. We're serious about this because we need people. Real quick, and I know it's 8:09. I'm gonna let you go. The question came up by some people. Well, why this, and why not just seminary? Everybody can't afford seminary. So what we did was we looked at courses that will help those, because here's what happens in the faith community. We hire people or we appoint people to positions that they have no skill set in, but we put them there in ministry positions because their mother so-and-so's nephew or niece, their deacon so-and-so's cousin or friend, they're faithful in the church. They come to church every Sunday. They tithe. They support the pastor. They do all these things. But when we put them in a position, they don't have any knowledge of what that position calls for except what you tell them or what you put in the job description. And you just hope that they can follow that job description to do the job that is called for. Well, we've seen that for years. And what we're trying to do is, if in fact you want somebody, a faith institution, to have a minister over community partnerships, then that person is going to come with all the qualifications that they need to have a comprehensive ministry and community partnership ministry within your church, within your faith institution. Okay. We want to equip faith institutions to have the tools necessary to deal with some of the societal ills that are happening right now in this world. So we came up with some of the best subjects that we could with books that you will read, assignments that you will have, papers that'll be written. We've got speakers that'll be part of some of the classroom training, and you need to be a part of this, okay? So tonight you got a little snippet. You want to go back and see some of the things we talked about. I hope you got something from this. Go back in the chat, let me know. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and on LinkedIn, so that throughout the week, when the Lord says so, and I get the unction to give about some information or talk about something, you'll be alerted to those things that come up. So in the meantime, enjoy yourself. I hope all of you are safe and wherever you're viewing from. I know it's some bad weather going across the Midwest. We pray for safety of those who are involved in some of those storms. Be careful out on those roads, and safe travel to you. And God bless you. Peace and love. Go out and meet needs and solve problems, man. Until next week, God bless. See ya.